What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next I'm going to talk about some crazy sales I just saw, as well as a tip I think is really useful if you are buying and selling comics. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Again, I really appreciate everybody liking and subscribing to the channel. I just crossed the 2,000 subscribers mark, so I thought that was awesome. I really appreciate it. And so now with this video, what I wanted to talk about was kind of an incredible set of sales that I saw on the Heritage Weekly comic auction. And so if you're not aware, I talk about the Heritage Weekly comic auctions pretty regularly because I follow them. One, because I like to buy books, so I sometimes buy books from them. Also, to help keep me informed with what's going on in the comic market. There's a lot of books that sell from all different genres and publishers and all that, so you get to get a good perspective of what's selling where. And sometimes it even gives me new books I've never seen before, so that's always fun. It gets you exposed to potentially some books that you're maybe not familiar with. And then I also use it to make my market videos, my top 10 videos, that kind of thing. So it's very useful for me. But the one thing that I saw this week that I thought was really cool was the quantity of Amazing Spider-Man books that came up for sale. This was a really unusual sale. There were, for like the big Silver Age keys, even the later keys, the bronze keys, there were multiple copies of almost all of them. In some cases, a couple graded copies, usually also a raw copy. So there were lots of opportunities there for people to pick up books, but I mean, they were pretty pricey. They definitely seemed to fetch some pretty good prices. But the one that I really wanted to talk about was a unique situation I've never seen before on this auction, and that was with Amazing Fantasy 15. Now, I've seen Amazing Fantasy 15 sell in the weekly comic auction plenty of times. That doesn't happen all the time, but regularly enough. But this time, there were 3 of them. So the 3 different copies that they had were a CGC 3.5 universal copy. When I say universal, I mean that it's one of the blue labels. So basically a copy that hasn't been restored or signed, anything like that. Then there was a CGC 2.5 signature series copy. And so this has the yellow label. This means it was a signature that CGC witnessed. In this case, it was Stan Lee. And then the last one was a raw copy. And I almost never see raw copies. I can't think of the last time if I've ever seen a raw copy come up for sale on Heritage, the Heritage Weekly comic auction, because usually people will get them graded. So you don't come across them too often in that state, but this one this one was really rough, and I actually think it probably helped out the sales price, the fact that it was not graded. But so now I'm going to talk about why I thought these sales were so interesting, and the little bit of advice that I have for if you're into buying and selling books, something I think that people often forget and is helpful to remember. So all 3 books had very impressive sales, really strong sales numbers for Amazing Fantasy 15, which isn't a surprise after that huge record sale. I think I've talked about that one before, but the $3.6 million sale, the highest price ever paid for a comic, was for an Amazing Fantasy 15 CGC 9.6, and that happened just, I think, about 2 weeks ago now. Now, the first book I'm going to talk about is this 3.5, the Universal 3.5. This one sold for $38,400. So we're at a point now where this is about $11,000 per grade point for this book at this grade, which is just astounding numbers. Now, the prior record in this grade was $28,800, but there had been some other sales and other grades around that, so I expected a higher number. For example, there had been a $31,200 sale on August 9th, so I had estimated the price of this book at about $34,000. This beat that pretty handedly by $4,400, so a little over 10%, so really strong sale. Now, the second book I'm going to talk about here is the raw copy. Now, this one was graded by Heritage as a 0.5, and I completely agree with that grade. Like I said, I'll throw a picture of it up here as well. And it's brutal. I mean, it's almost like somebody stuck like a bunch of tape or something to the front of it and pulled off a big portion of the book, and the other part was exposed to something that got really water damaged. I mean, it looks rough. I mean, it's a 0.5 all the way, and it is not a good looking 0.5. You know, you can have 0.5s where they're, say, missing an ad page or something like that, and they look really nice, very presentable books. This is not a presentable book. This is a low grade copy that also doesn't look good. It looks like it's great. Now, the interesting thing with this one is it sold for $15,600, and that ties the 0.5 record from June 14th. So not only did it tie the 0.5, and if I can find the picture, I'll throw the picture up of that one. That 0.5 looks much nicer, and that one's already graded. And so because this is such an expensive book, if you're getting this book graded, you have to go through the walkthrough tier. Walkthrough tier is 3% of value of the book. And so let's pretend they estimated the value at $15,000. Then you have to pay 3% of $15,000, around $500, just to get that book graded, plus shipping, anything like that. So there's also an additional expense that's going in if that person decides to get that book graded. And like I said, the other one looked much nicer. So this was a really high price, strong sale for this raw copy. Now, the one that I really want to talk about is this last one. This is the 2.5 signature series. So again, I'll throw the picture up here. This one is signed by Stan Lee. And when I talked about signatures in one of my prior videos, I had purchased a few Stan Lee signed books, and I mentioned that I know there are people that do not like signatures on books, especially on Silver Age books, big keys, because they see it as somebody, wrecking that book, damaging that book. But just because you don't like something doesn't mean other people don't like that thing. And this is a perfect example of that. This book sold for $45,600. Now, I will say, this is a nice looking copy. I mean, it is a nice looking 2.5. The colors are really, really nice. Amazing reds, amazing yellows. The Stan Lee signature is clear. It's in a good spot. You can see, if you look at the label, it was signed in 2012. So this is an older signature. So there's a couple things with that. Stan Lee signatures tend to be a little more clear, a little stronger in the older signatures, but you can also see that this is in a new slab. So somebody definitely got this book re-slabbed so that it presented probably a little better in the clearer plastic, not the cloudy plastic. But the prior record for a 2.5 was on August 2nd, and that was for $30,000. So this beat that sale by $15,600, or 52%. With that signature. Now, I can't say if all of that was because of the signature, maybe a little increase in the value of the book, but still well over $10,000 for that signature alone on that book. It also beat the price of the 3.5 unsigned book by $7,200. And that was a nice looking 3.5. I mean, that 3.5 looked very sharp and clean, had great colors, and this 2.5, also nice, but a full grade point lower and selling for more because of that signature. So what is my point with all of this? I mean, one thing, it shows how strong the high-end market is right now. That's something I've talked about in some of my market videos, is that the place that I've really been seeing strong sales, in addition to the golden age, is also in very high-end books, really expensive books. We're seeing very strong sales there. But the other thing, and this is where my tip is coming in for if you're into buying and selling books, remember that just because you like or dislike something doesn't mean everybody else feels the same way. And this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with just in general. It is also very true when it comes to comics, where people have very strong opinions about characters and about graded books or ungraded books or signatures or whatever else it might be. And the important thing to remember is that just because you don't like something, it doesn't mean that other people don't like that a lot and potentially don't value that a lot. So if you're into buying and selling books, just because you think a character isn't great, or you don't like a character, or you don't like signatures, it doesn't necessarily mean you should pass up on picking something up if you see it for a good price or a good deal, just because you don't like it, because someone else might like it a lot. And this is a perfect example of that. If somebody, say, had an opportunity to pick up a Stan Lee signed Amazing Fantasy 15 or other similar key for say, around the price of the unsigned copy, you potentially have a significant gain on that book. And that could be because that person selling it doesn't value that signature. And that's at their own detriment. That's their own mistake. And so that's what I'm getting at, is that it's just important to remember, if you're out there hunting for books, buying books, that don't pass up on things just because it's something that maybe you don't like, because there are all kinds of collectors out there. There's all kinds of different perspectives and things that people enjoy, or, you know, whatever it is with the hobby. And so don't pass up on that potential gem that's out there just because it's something that you don't like. So let me know in the comments section, what are your thoughts on signatures versus unsigned books? Are there ever any books that you passed on that you wish you would have picked up, or maybe books that you did pick up just for this very reason, something that you were looking to sell that you weren't actually all that interested in? Let me know. I always like talking with people in the comments. So with that, that's just what I wanted to cover here. A few just incredible, amazing Fantasy 15 sales. Just still setting records with that book right now. Like I said, watch that high-end market. That is really where we're seeing strong sales right now. And remember, if you're into selling books as well, just remember there are lots of different types of collectors out there. And that book that you may pass on just because it's something that you don't personally like, remember, that's the type of book that maybe you should pick up, because it's also easier to let go of books that you don't personally like as much. So just some little bits of advice if you're into buying and selling books that I think could be helpful. If you enjoyed this video, if you thought this video was useful, interesting, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. We've got more videos over here. If you'd like to watch some of my other videos, I've got the subscription button right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.